Hey guys, my name is Toby and welcome back to another very exciting Photoshop tutorial where today we're going to be taking a look at how to remove colour fringing from your photos. Now, if you're not familiar with colour fringing, this is basically the name for what happens when you get these kind of colourful highlights around edges of your subjects sometimes, and it's pretty ugly and it would be lovely to be able to get rid of it. Now, it can be caused by a number of different things. Sometimes it can just be low quality lenses and filters will often make this happen. But equally, even if you're using very high quality lenses, sometimes light can just hit your camera at the wrong angle and it can cause this to happen. And a lot of the time it's just actually to do with the way that image sensors convert light into digital information. But either way, we want to get rid of it. And a lot of the time, if you're working in RAW, there is actually an option in all of Adobe's RAW tools, and I believe Capture One and Aperture have something similar, if I'm not mistaken, to remove this at the RAW processing stage. However, we're working with a JPEG, which means that we don't have a RAW file to play around with this. But fear not, because in Adobe Photoshop, I believe from about CS5 onwards, there is an option to use Adobe Camera Raw as a filter in Photoshop. Now, before we go ahead and click this, I'm going to do something first, which is I'm going to convert this layer into a smart object. And hopefully you'll see why in just a minute, but we're now going to go up to here, go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and here we are inside of Camera Raw with a JPEG file. So we can do an awful lot of toning of our image in here, but the tab we're really interested in is the Lens Corrections tab just here. Now, a lot of the time with certain types of fringing, you can just tick this little box here, remove chromatic aberration, and that will make everything go away and it will be lovely. But this is a different type of fringing that we're dealing with, so unfortunately that tick box hasn't done anything in this case, but a lot of the time that is very much worth trying, and sometimes that will be all you need to do. Job done, no problems. But as we can see, we need to do a little bit more work than that to get rid of this horrible fringing mess. So we've got these pairs of sliders here and effectively have a remove amount and a kind of a color range selector. So we can kind of, move these points around and, narrow down or widen the amount of different hues that we're going to be affecting. But we want to start dragging the purple amount up. And as we can see, this isn't actually doing anything, which says to me we've got the wrong hue selected. So if we drag this down, you can see that it's now going to start to affect these tones. So we can kind of maybe make this a bit wider, I reckon. Something like that's probably pretty good. And we can do the same thing with the green sliders. So we can bring the green amount up and then just kind of widen this until that mostly gets kind of knocked out. Now, the thing is, it's not actually doing... It's done a good job in this bit of our image, but for the rest of it, it's actually left quite a lot of fringing still there. So normally, I wouldn't do this. This image, to be fair to it, has been deliberately taken to make this colour fringe as much as physically possible. So normally you would not be dealing with something quite this extreme. So what we're going to do is, like I say, I normally wouldn't put the amount of these up more than about between 6 and 8. That's probably about as high as I would want that to go. And it's mainly because if you're dealing with something like a face, let's say, and you've got your, let's say your purple hue goes up into the oranges, the more you bring this up, if you look at this sort of highlight here, if we have that all the way down, it's kind of a nice smooth highlight. As soon as we bring this up to a silly amount, it goes all kind of hard-edged and weird. So that's without and with, and that doesn't look very good. And if you've got skin tones, when it's set up at that kind of orange point, it's going to start to creep into your skin tones. Equally, if you've got someone with a colourful lipstick or anything that is the same colour as the fringing, it's going to start to create kind of like a black and white outline around the thing that you're trying to, well, have a nice photo of. And it can be quite distracting. So what we're actually going to do, because we've got this huge amount of fringing, is we're going to go a little bit silly with it. We're going to bring these way, way up. And we're going to do something a bit like that, I think, just to make sure that we knock out every possible trace of this colour fringing. And that's pretty good, and we're going to hit OK. So now we've got our smart object with some smart filters applied to it. And first of all, the cool thing about smart filters, if you've not used them before, and just to be clear about what a smart filter is, if you turn an object into a smart object, so it has this little icon in it just here, whenever you apply a filter, so let's just give you an example, we can put a blur on there, go mad with it, hit OK, it's going to add it to the smart filters list, and then at any point you can come back in and edit that filter. So we actually don't want a Gaussian blur, so we can delete that smart filter. Give it a second, there we go. So equally, we can go back into Camera Raw here, and we can, it goes back to our lens corrections and it's all still there. So there's a lot we can do with that, and it's quite a nice way to work, particularly if you're working on a bigger composite. But the other cool thing about smart filters is, you may have noticed, it's actually given us a layer mask for the filters. So we can now come up here, and even though we've got this crisp edge where it's kind of overdone the defringing, we can take the brush tool and let's just go ahead and right click, make this a little bit bigger, and we'll make it quite a soft brush. And now we can paint with black onto this layer mask. So I'm just going to make sure that I swap my foreground background colors by hitting X, and we can start to paint back in this orange gradient. Now we've got to be careful not to accidentally add back in some of this color fringing. So you can carefully come in here and you can kind of mask back in some of these problem areas so that this filter is no longer going to be affecting them. And it's just, it's a nice way to work. It means that we can actually have a little bit more control over how this filter is going to be affecting our image. And it means that we can, just make sure that it's not going to do anything silly that we don't want. So there we go, something like that. I think that's looking pretty good. In this case, we're really just looking at this kind of highlight that we've got here. So we can just make sure we paint black onto this area to make sure that this orange here isn't being affected. There we go. And we'll just make sure those bits of purple sort of disappear. And that's looking pretty good. So when you sort of consider where we started with this image, which I will show you in just a second, to where it is now. So if we turn off our Camera Raw filter, you can see we've got all of this nasty, horrible sort of purple and green mess. And then with the Camera Raw filter on, it all disappears like magic. Actually, there's a bit there that I missed. There we go. So that's going to be it for this time, guys. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Toby, and we'll see you next time.